Happy Friday. Thanks for joining us for another edition of Take Two. This is Heidi Hatch with KUTV 2 News. Maura Carabello is in the house as always from the Exoro group. And John Dougall is a ray of sunshine joining us on this gorgeous Friday.
Great to be with you again.
I think we just hit meeting the record for the weather, so I think we hit like 80 or 81 degrees.
This
and
is
it's still going to get warmer, yeah. So
from when? The 80s?
I don't know. I should have looked that up.
I didn't
but
see.
yeah, it's super warm today, so.
It is warm.
And it was snowing just days ago.
Yeah,
So.
I know.
And probably will be days from
I
now.
always wish you could, you know, when you have people come in town, you want it to be nice for them so you
Right.
can like show them a great time. But my friends from Florida came and it was snowing, was that a week and a half ago, and I'm like, sorry about this weather, and then they leave, and
But don't
it's
they want
gorgeous.
snow?
I think they sort of
A
liked
little
it,
bit,
yes.
but don't they? They don't want a gray, frigid January, but don't you want a good-natured spring storm?
Yeah, you
They're
want to
not
get cold.
hard. They're not harsh.
It's true. I remember living in Florida, and sometimes you're like, I just want to feel like something cool and
Yeah,
crisp. So
just something
yeah, we
different.
gave them a little
Rather
bit
than
of that.
the same weather day
Those
in, day
people
out.
who are suffering from beautiful weather
What
all
about
the
those
time.
Yes.
lizards freezing and falling out of the trees?
I know, such a hard time. Well, as usual, it's been a crazy week. I'm back from doing a little wedding dress shopping with my daughter. You're weeks away from your son getting married.
That's right.
Maura, any surprise weddings at your house
I know,
you've got
like
going
nobody
on?
I know is getting married
Whew.
right now. Whew.
I know, your daughter who just went to college, she might be grounded if she did, right? Called up
She
and
is
said,
not
Mom.
allowed. She is not allowed. She did go to the spring formal at the
Ooh, I love
aquarium
that.
yesterday in Denver. So there.
Super fun.
An update on what she's doing.
I
Excellent.
do. All right, I know. Our
Thanks,
grown-up
Mom.
kids doing grown-up things.
Yeah.
Well, back here in the great state of Utah, we're watching kind of, is it bad to say the fallout from the legislative session? We're also watching the fallout from a new
No, I feel
presidency.
like it's apropos for this presidency and this legislative session.
Yes.
It seems to keep on giving.
I
The
also,
dust is not settling.
yeah. I also got a text today as we're watching everything happen just a few minutes ago from Karen Kwan, and she was wanting to let me know that if I would like to help put my signature to help overturn the Union Bill HB 267, there's only a couple days left. I
Yeah.
heard that
You
they're
jumped right out
close.
there and you,
I have signed nothing, but the protectutahworkers.com is where people can go. Mar, have you been hearing? I heard they were close to getting what they needed.
I heard they were close. Now, what I don't know about is their distribution. So remember, we got
Over the
two
counties.
really high bars. One is a percentage, 8% of the last election, which is about 140,000 plus. And they claim to have had that number a few weeks ago, but that was
I've been hearing they've been close for weeks now.
yeah. So that was an undocumented. You know, that was just a gather record. And then I heard the loose rumor that they were only 6 or 7 counties or Senate districts in. You need to be 15 Senate districts in. The distribution is bare. Here's the other thing that has been made even harder by the legislature is those who are opposed have an additional 45 days to talk you into
removing.
retracting your signature. So that
Interesting, I didn't
clock
realize that
still is
happened.
on. So the proponents, the ones who want to challenge this, their clock will end. They will have to submit their signatures.
Their signatures are public or the names are public.
That's right, and the clerks will tell us if they made it, but if they do make it, the opponents of this will still have just over a month to have us all talked into taking our signatures.
I forgot about that.
Tough. It's
All
a
right.
tough go.
Yes, so the drama continues.
Now, they have raised over $2 million, and they have hired a signature gathering firm, which you have to have, no matter how many citizens are supportive. Our test is too hard to do without paid helpers. And some of the paid helpers, interestingly enough, are in the form of in-kind union folks coming into town doing some good work here in the great state of Utah, including Hawaii. So,
Good work?
Yeah.
Maybe it's in the eye of the beholder. It's good work.
I say direct to the voter conversations are always good. I am not one who believes that the only people who can make decisions are elected officials. I think sometimes the voters themselves know what they're doing, given it's their money and their tax dollars and their rights.
An unelected Mara saying this to a formerly elected.
That's
Right,
right.
the one thing John and I share is John has always felt like the elected official is an honor of service, not a grandiose title, and he always acted like a public servant. And I am critical of those who think that by electing they're in an elevated status
Yeah.
instead of a subordinate, but in
You
fact
serve us.
honored. It's an honored role.
Absolutely, and Maura knows, while I've opposed initiatives in the past, I've been fully supportive of referendums and allowing people to challenge legislative action. I'm just not one of those that likes the super empowered union status that comes. I have no problem with people wanting to join unions, voluntarily associate together, but when government is compelled to negotiate and deal with union demands, that's where I disagree.
All right. Well, something that people are disagreeing on and have very strong feelings about, even if you're not very educated, we all have 401ks. And we're watching. Yes.
You're not very educated. Really?
Yes, that's true. No, but like
I'm almost done with school. 1 more week.
everything, that's true. Congratulations. We have an almost attorney here, so you've been going to law school on the slide.
It's been
So
on the bucket list for 40 years.
You need to think of what's
You have a weird
what's
bucket
the
list. What else is
loftiest
next?
title? Esquire, what's the loftiest way we can refer to you as legal counsel?
Just only John.
No, I know, but I think we should
I don't
find
know.
it. I will take that on as my homework.
There you go.
yeah, all right. You need a fancy title after all that homework. Absolutely. So I hope you pass the final test and remember all the answers. Everything that happens, it seems like lately everyone all of a sudden becomes an expert online. And right now we're looking at the stock market, and even if you're not an expert in trading or bonds or whatever's going on, we all have 401ks. We're watching what's happening to them. And it seems like President Trump single-handedly was able to crash the stock market with his new tariffs that came out that he was very excited about, and then just as easily people were crediting him with saving things when everything went back up again, and then it went down. And today I was just looking, it looks like we've kind of gone back up again a little bit, the Dow closing up about 600 points. But when you're looking at this, the question is this part of the art of the deal, or are we just cleaning up messes as he goes along and he's kind of figuring it out? John, do you believe that the president has
This
a
is the
plan?
ultimate cleanup deal.
Yeah. Does he have a specific plan, and is he sticking to it when you see it and you can understand the tariffs, or do you feel like he's trying to put them in place and then getting scared and pulling back?
I think he's got some concepts. I'm not sure I'd say it's fully a plan, but he's got some concepts, some guiding principles that to him are very important. And he thinks America is getting ripped off when it comes to trade.
Are we?
No, I mean, in some aspects we are, but we've done it to ourselves. We've disadvantaged our own companies to the advantage of companies in foreign countries. But we've done that to ourselves. And that's why my recommendation is, first and foremost, cut regulation, cut taxes, make America the most welcoming place to do business, rather than do these punitive tariffs. I'm a free trade kind of guy. I understand the concept of reciprocal tariffs. They make some small sense, but what was imposed was not reciprocal tariffs. A trade deficit is not a tariff-related unfair practice.
So for those Republicans listening, and if that sounded familiar, that is traditional conservative policy, which you won't recognize in the Trump administration, because I think what we're seeing is, regardless of your position on the policy, what we do know is that he's introduced instability, and it appears to be intentional.
And one of the key things, business can cope with bad policy,
Yes,
bad regulatory
exactly.
policy, bad tax policy,
Exactly.
much better than it can deal with uncertainty.
And that's where I'm headed. It is a very different beast to object to someone's policy than it is to just look at what I think is on face an aging mercurial mind who has no policy, and he has some things he's mapping to, but this is not an economic plan. And I think what I'm concerned about is just that. What he has introduced with certainty is uncertainty. And what we now know is this 90 days is not comfortable for everybody. And it doesn't almost matter what he does next, because what we can judge him on is that he's introduced instability. And as John said, I mean, we've both been on the downside, so I'll give an old school one. I don't traditionally believe in trickle-down economics. But I can tell you why, and I can tell you variations that I do agree with, and I can tell you what would work for me, and we could formulate a plan together, even if you were in charge and had a direction I didn't like. There is no direction. He is subject to whim. You saw a really either interesting or hostile back and forth with our representative on trade, who was not keeping up with the president because the president was tweeting at the same time, and he didn't have that information. I mean, the hallmark of the last month has been instability, and it seems to be intentional. and the market will never respond well to that.
And when you look at business investment, usually you're not talking days to, I'm going to invest and I'm going to get a return in days. You're talking months to years, and sometimes decades when you invest in a long-term project. If all of a sudden you don't know what's going to happen in the next 90 days or the next year, and you look at somebody like IKEA, okay, they went to expand a manufacturing plant and install it in the U.S. with the assumption of the supply chain is still going to be there. So while we build the cars here, we're going to get parts from around the world. All of a sudden, this trade deal on and off again, I think causes them uncertainty about what does this mean. And I think where he's coming from is he wants companies like Kia and others doing business here.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter where the company's from. We want them doing business in America. And all of a sudden now you create uncertainty and cause people to sit on their cash rather than invest in business, invest in jobs, and grow the economy.
So from a free market, from a world leadership, from a American reputation, from good foreign policy, from good economic policy, I am not on board with any of this. So, but I do want to point out one thing to just sort of where I'm looking at stability. 80% of the U.S. market is based on services, not goods. And so I do want to keep in mind the perspective on how much buying and goods. Now, there's a big overlap between those two. That Venn diagram is a little harder to map, so I don't want to make this too simple.
You and your math concepts here.
But most of our economic engine comes from services. And so it's not as though tariffs don't impact those, but they have a slightly less impactful outcome, as does the goods economy.
Yeah, I think uncertainty is the big word. I was at the food bank earlier this week too, and that's the word they're using, where families are just nervous because they just don't know what direction they're going to be and how to plan. And so I think that's the big word, I think, if we had to give it for the month right now. Is
you own a small car dealership? What are you doing right now? How do you even know what you should have on your lot? How do you know how many cars you should go get?
Yeah.
And Utah is really excellent about building cottage industries, mid-level market entrepreneurs, having small businesses, and that's one of the reasons that we've had such a durable economy. And those businesses really go down fast because they're not big enough to survive major waves. And so this seems to be a policy that's agnostic of the everyday person just trying to work it out.
The other thing that's going to weigh in on this, manufacturing is a big push. We're going to expand manufacturing in America. And I love that concept. But the other thing we have to realize is much of that's going to be automated. We're going to have robots and others doing that, and we're going to have humans managing the robots. But while we can expand manufacturing, the question is, how many jobs will that really expand versus how much will it just expand with robotics that we're overseeing?
Yeah, I saw a robot this morning giving a TED Talk. I'm like, oh, we don't even need TED Talks from people anymore. So robots, the wave of the future. Here in Utah, universities here, not just the University of Utah, but universities across the state of Utah are reporting student visas being revoked, and they say many without notice. We should note that this is not out of the norm. Visas are revoked on a regular basis. What may be new is that there's not as much notice and it's happening quickly. Maura, we're hearing from spokespersons from each of these universities about how many students they are. Some of them are happening pretty immediately and right before graduation, which is stressing some people out. But these are coming from issues of visas where they run out, they shouldn't be in the country anymore, they didn't renew them, or they found out they got a DUI. Is this okay that we're cleaning up these messes, or are we going about it the wrong way?
We're going about this the wrong way. I mean, this is all based on fear tactics. Something that's interesting is Columbia was only marked with 4. The University of Utah has 20. I want to say SUU had 8. Like, Utah schools disproportionately. And I think, now this is based on not statistics, but one of the things I think is that is because Utah has traditionally been a very welcoming state of international cultures. We send so many people out on LDS missions. I think we're really tolerant and curious about other languages and foods and cultures, and I think you see that in us being very welcoming of having cultural experiences. Well, right now in America, we're having a very not cultural experience. We don't like inclusion. We don't agree with diversity. We're trying to cut out people, and we're framing this all in the context of criminality. Students, these aren't criminals that we're dealing with, so then these are targeted incidences. We know at the University of Utah that half of them.
Well, they criminal if they've got a DUI and when they came in on their visa that they were supposed to obey the laws.
We have no evidence right now that any of these students have criminal charges. right?
Only
yeah,
just vague statements from the University of Utah
Only
saying that they
vague
either
statements.
lapsed or that they have some kind of criminal charge
Right.
against them, yeah.
Criminal charges are different.
Yeah.
We've never been stopped from stopping criminals.
Yeah.
And when we talk about violations in status, those are civil charges. Those are akin to your parking tickets. And if we want to crack down on people's civil charges, then we should be stopping anyone who looks like they haven't paid their taxes on time, and we should be shaking them down because
April
it's the
15th
equivalent.
is coming up.
Yes,
That's
it
right.
is.
Right in the line. If you see someone not making contact with someone we should start wearing big IRS windbreakers instead of ice. And if they won't make eye contact with
Then
you,
get 'em.
shake them down for their 2023 taxes. So, I mean, those are all civil charges. It's hard not to believe that this isn't about the crackdown that we have right now on free thought and education. It puts the universities in a bind because they're feeling a lot of pressure for compliance. It does sound like they're largely compliant. But I do want to put out the juxtaposition of, us leading the nation in the Utah Compact, us leading the nation and saying everyone here is welcoming and open. And I think that's probably why we have what seem like a disproportionately higher group of international students. We've long been people who are curious about other cultures. We've long been a nation who embraces people coming here to educate themselves and better themselves. And I think this is a political movement. I'm going to say I don't know anyone who does not want to do something about criminals, but I think this is a big old criminal umbrella that is largely just being used.
Your thought, same thing, or do we have to make people obey the laws and follow what they're supposed to be doing when they're here on visas?
Well, one of the key things, step back, look at Utah and how it was founded with the pioneers coming and so forth. Okay, fleeing foreign countries, looking for a safe haven to worship how they want, to live how they wanted to, and so forth. So this is, I think, part of what feeds into why we've been so welcoming, in addition to what Maura has said, to those from other countries that want to come, live, and create a better life. Now, clearly, when we look across the nation, there's criminality, and there's been serious problems with that. There's been mayhem at the border, and we've watched that for years, where that wasn't adequately addressed with. And we see some communities across the nation that are being overwhelmed with the number of immigrants that are entering their community, and it's causing agitation and turmoil economically and otherwise in those communities. When you come here, I think the key concern for most Utahns is safety and security, and wanting to make sure the criminals that are here improperly are ousted from our country. But they struggle with the concept of, here's somebody that overstayed their visa, they've got a family here, they're living peaceably, they're providing for their community, they're fully integrated, they're part of the neighborhood, and then to see them get disrupted and either threatened or have concerns or be deported. And we've seen that over the years, even before this administration, where folks have just simply overstayed their visa. And that's where I think for most Utahns, they're much more understanding. If we got to figure out the visa process, we want to welcome those that want a better life. We should have concerns with those committing crimes and living on welfare, but not those that want to have a better life, a safer life, and want to be a productive part of our society.
Most immigrants are willing and wanting to comply with the law. Our laws don't have the capacity to allow them to do that, and so deporting them because of our own flaws, that's an option, but also vilifying them because we don't have a system that allows them to comply. I mean, in a lot of instances, it's not because they don't want to. It's because they can't get a hold of anybody, or they can't filled out the papers. They were waiting for a date that was 18 months in advance. It's not because they're wanting to stay off of the system.
Yeah, process seems to be a big part of the problem.
Well, one of the other things is decades ago, workers from Mexico used to come and go with the seasons.
Right.
And
With the
now,
work permits, yeah.
work permits and others, but with the season it would ebb and flow. And now, as we've more secured the border, they come and they can't go, so then they bring their family in and so forth to perpetuate it because of certain regulations we put in place that have impaired the natural flow of workers.
Yeah, interesting problem. So we're going to be watching as this plays out. The universities promise that when they have more information, they'll pass it along to us. So we'll let you know how that goes. Speaking of universities, John, you brought this one up. The University of Utah faculty right now, they're losing some power. They're not happy about it.
They're having a meltdown.
Yes, they're having a small meltdown, a temper tantrum. And this is fallout not from this last legislative session, but from a full year ago. So this is happening where the University of Utah, President Randall is putting the pants
Yeah,
back on and he's in
President
charge.
Randall, that's
Yes.
right.
So is he the bad guy in this situation, or should the president be taking some power back from the faculty?
The president absolutely should be taking power back from the faculty. The legislature, one of the reasons they ran this bill was they assumed presidents across our public institutions were running their institutions, and then found out too often they felt like the wings were clipped, that academic senates were dictating and undermining the presidents. And so this makes clear, presidents, these are your duties, these are your authorities. You're very welcome to work with the faculty and so forth, and as an employer, it always makes sense to work with your employees, but these are your duties, and it's your choice in how you engage with them. You aren't just cut out of it, and the academic senate really runs the institutions.
It's hard to be a parent if you haven't been playing that role for a lot of years. So Maura, is this going to be a tough switch for universities?
I think it is. It's also a perspective that I don't share. I think that this is another attempt. I mean, the legislature has become so accustomed to top-down arbitrary leadership that they think it's a superior
Trickle-down
leadership.
leaderships?
Yeah. They think it's just, I mean, they have perfected the grab of power. And I am not afraid of ideas, and I'm not afraid of academic senates, and I'm not afraid of a little chaos, and I'm not afraid in a publicly funded space like higher education. I'm not afraid of a battle of ideas. I think it's okay that education is not running like a corporation. And I think it's an interesting conundrum for the presidents because they've been in the sights of the legislature now for a couple of years, particularly the University of Utah. So, I mean, I think they are apt to comply with this directive, but I also think it's the wrong directive. I think it's part of an overall wave of us being afraid of undisciplined voices, afraid of some amount of creative and chaotic thinking. And I think that what has made culture and American culture so great is the battle for ideas, the insistence that efficiency doesn't always serve the mind, it doesn't always serve innovation. And I don't think that you saw a rogue group of people operating in the darkness at any of these academic institutions. I think what you saw is a set of ideas that the 104 legislators didn't agree with. And we are intolerant right now of people who don't think like us and don't act like us and don't want the same things as us. So I don't think this is the style of leadership that is going to generate the best and brightest minds that we have in the state of Utah.
If only it was the rainbows and unicorns that Maura portrayed. This is not a battle of ideas.
We have one of the best higher education systems in the nation, I thought.
But what we have here, this isn't about ideas. First of all, you had control in the academic senate, not sharing ideas, but actually controlling different programs, practices.
And why
You know,
is
when
that
they
not?
reached over and said, you know, College of Engineering, we don't want you to offer that course unless you comply with what we're saying over here. That's out of control. That's reaching. When I was a parent, I didn't put on my auditor hat, but I put on my parent hat and called to understand some of the issues between one institution and another institution. And I was told, well, that's controlled by the subcommittee of the academic senate. I said, well, can I get the names and email addresses of those folks? No. I'm like, well, that should be public information, but you can't have it. And to be blunt, I'm looking at it on the website.
That's
where
a
it's over
different
here, but it's
solve.
like, but that all flowed out of the academic senate. It was not about sharing ideas and conflicting ideas and having a debate about ideas.
But that's a
This is
different
about
solve.
control of the academic senate.
Right,
Putting
so-
them, and this is about control, putting them back in a box rather than letting them run roughshod over the universities.
I have not heard the legislature complain about the performance academically of these institutions. I have not heard anyone assert that Utah students are B level. I haven't heard that the University of Utah Medical Center is not so good. I haven't heard that Utah Tech sucks. In fact, all the billboards I see are like seem pretty excellent to me. So there doesn't seem to be a performance problem. So what is there? Oh, there's a political problem. There's not a performance problem, and apparently we don't think anyone can make decisions except the state legislature. And I am just saying from my perspective, I'm denying that point of view, that the 104 people are the lay people are the only people that are qualified to make these decisions.
This is
And
not
now
the
they-
legislature running it.
the
This is the
legislature
legislature saying, President,
insisted
it's
that
your
there was
job."
a singular job. That was completely unnecessary. If the presidents wanted that, you're saying they don't have the authority to do that right now?
Over the years, presidents had given away power.
Right,
given it
and they didn't have the authority to take it back.
in essence, it had created the world in which they couldn't take it back.
And only the legislature could grant
Yes.
them that. I don't believe that.
But
I
that's the
believe
world
they
that-
could have changed it on their own had they had the desire. So if the person charged with stewarding this institution, if the person who has the expertise in stewarding it has to subjugate themselves to the will of someone who didn't go to that school, doesn't have a background in education, I just think that more and more the philosophy here is all power and good thinking flow from the Capitol, and I'm not sure I'm on board with that.
And my experience was, at the University of Utah, basically the academic Senate said, here's
So
basically
your
our
child
contract.
graduated from
No,
the university.
here's basically our contract, and the president can't change it without our approval. And this goes back for decades.
Did
This
your
thing was
child
decades old.
graduate from the University of Utah?
One did, one did. One's still going.
And the one who graduated, have they been able to live a successful life, or were they so destroyed
But how does
by
that
the education they
how
received?
what does that have to do with
That's
the
the
out-of-control
outcome.
academic
The
senate?
outcome is, did the kids achieve academically what they wanted to achieve?
Despite the
Oh
impairment
my
of the academic
gosh.
senate,
Despite the educational institution they achieved without the wraparound of the educational system.
despite the union bosses at the university.
Then why didn't they leave the university? Why didn't they check out and leave? Why didn't they self-educate? If our current high education system is so fraught with problems, then why aren't our kids failing at an epic level? Because I think Utah kids are doing pretty darn well. I'm very proud of our generation, despite the fact that they apparently have below average academic choices to go to once they graduate high school. I don't think that's true. I think there isn't a problem. I think that there's a political problem, and this is a part of people not thinking and believing the same way, and anyone who doesn't think and believe the same way must be wrong.
And to me, this is an organizational issue. The president is the CEO. You're
Right.
expecting the CEO
They're
to
the
step in
head.
and do certain things in the organization.
So
This
you're-
isn't putting it to a vote of the employees' senate within the organization. They're expecting the CEO to do certain activities.
that point of
And what
view-
it was doing was saying, basically, we're re-empowering the presidents to run the organizations the way we believe they're
All right,
supposed to.
we'll check back
what
in
they
with them in a
want.
year and see how it's going, to see if
With the
everyone's still
presidents?
happy.
I mean,
Or maybe
like,
the teachers, the
yeah,
professors.
I mean, I'm like, that's Stockholm syndrome, man. Like, they're gonna tell you it's going fine.
Yeah.
Because that's their choice right now.
Speaking of whether things are going fine or not, there's a battle for ideas going on in the Democratic Party right now. There's always the next election, and we have
What's coming up?
Bernie Sanders. I know there's always another election. Bernie Sanders is going to be in the great state of Utah this Palm Sunday, and AOC will be joining him. They're on a tour that they've been calling Fighting the Oligarchy. They're stopping here. They're going to California, Idaho, Montana, so they've got some busy plans this weekend.
How much does it cost to attend?
That I don't remember. It's up at the Huntsman Center at the University of Utah. Are there tickets? I had something like pulled up about it, now I can't remember.
I just teased and I couldn't resist.
I think it's free, but there may be tickets they buy for it. I don't know. But it is up at the University of Utah. We're watching this play out, and I see some jockeying for position because I see Newsom in California trying to moderate what he's doing. I see Pete Buttigieg on every talk show. He's like has something to say about everything, so he's obviously running. And then we have Bernie Sanders, who I think has a lot of popularity here in Utah. If we look back to 2016. He won the primary with 80% of the vote against Hillary Clinton's 20%. So he obviously has a following here in Utah. I don't think he's realistically going to be the presidential candidate of choice, but he's trying to get people to listen, and people are showing up right now, Maura.
Yeah, I'm going to add Cory Booker into this mix and his 25-plus
That's
hour
true.
filibuster.
Did you watch it?
So, not all 25 hours. I watched a few.
Not even triple speed?
No,
He didn't
exactly.
take any bathroom breaks, so I've got to give him a high
can't.
five for that.
You can't.
Did
I
you
thought
hear
that you
he,
could
like,
have timeouts for
didn't
that.
eat or
Drink?
prepped for it, and
Yeah, no, you
Yeah.
can't leave.
You
the
have to
floor.
be in really
You
good
have to
shape
stay
to
on
do
the
this.
Yeah,
floor.
you do.
You don't have to
So,
speak
I'm a
for
heavy
it.
water drinker.
Exactly, that's dehydration. So a lot of people are also feeling the burn.
Yeah.
I think that Bernie Sanders isn't going for the presidency. We've watched Bernie Sanders go for the presidency, like 6-7 times.
Yeah.
So we know what it looks like when he's going for it. But he also, this is clearly the Democrats seeing a leadership vacuum.
Yeah.
We're seeing that both Elon Musk and Donald Trump, if you 538 aggregate their scores, they're tanking, they're going, and they'll go back up. But like for the moment, they're at a little bit of an ebb. So you're seeing the Democrats understand at least that they need to take advantage. The challenge is the group of names you just said, right? None of them are revolutionary, none of them are that inspiring. I do think that the Bernie Sanders and AOC is to just bring attention away from Trump, who is such a master at getting attention. I don't think what the Democrats are giving anybody is much to hold on to as an alternative, but, I'm going to give them a tip of the hat for just even saying, we'll look our way for a while. We'll have a little bit of a circus for a minute.
Yeah, they're creating a little energy, which surprises me, because I feel when you just finish a presidential election, the last thing I want to do is go to a political rally, but they're getting some good crowds.
Well, it should be pointed out how good the crowd was at the anti-Trump march over the weekend.
Yes, I missed that when I was out of town.
That was as big of a crowd as I have seen gather in Utah in ages, and it's all over the place from whence these people come. Speaking only to where is people's energy, where do they have the energy? Because I don't think those are pure politics, and I'm not sure if they translate to voting, but just where are people's energy?
So is George Soros sending $15 checks to everyone to show up to these, like some people are saying online, or are they just really feeling it?
I think they're just feeling it. I think this is a pretty large coalition who has some pent up, I need to move and express and do something, and I just need to yell and speak a little my truth. I need to do something about it.
Yeah. So what do you think? Is this a good time for Democrats? Because Republicans are still trying to find their way right now, too.
Yeah, it's not a good time for Democrats. And from my perspective, what's going on is you've got Bernie and AOC that are trying to double down, saying the problem with the Democratic Party is it hasn't fully embraced the Democratic message, what I would call a socialist message. That's what he wants to pull the Democratic Party further.
Yeah, he's going hard left.
Gavin Newsom saying, hey, the Democratic brand is toxic, and we have to come back. We have looked down on so many of the blue-collar workers of America, and that's why they flock to Trump. We have to get back to bread and butter Democratic messages and stop being this toxic, arrogant brand of elitists that we've become. And so it's interesting to watch that play out. Now, we've got our own warfare going on in the Republican Party, but looking over the Democrats, that's what I see is they just were stunned by an election that they lost, that they thought, there's no way we can lose this thing. And now they're trying to figure out who they are.
I should note that Kamala Harris is still running again next time, too. She's out there doing her thing, but I just don't see her. I see her doing.
I've never heard a word about her.
Yeah, her fundraising apparatus is still.
Yeah, it still exists, and I see her doing things, but I'm like, I think you had your shot and you missed it. So it'll be interesting to see where that all goes. We're going to see a lot of those internal party battles coming up in the next few months in the spring here as we're electing leadership for Utah Democrats and Republicans as well. So we'll be watching that closely. Also, Monday, I wasn't at work then, so I kind of missed out on this, but RFK Jr. made that stop we were talking about here. He came with the EPA's Lee Zeldin, and who was the third person he was with? My brain just forgot.
Transportation.
Yes, transportation.
Sean Duffy.
Yeah, so they were here talking, and Maura, you kind of guessed that RFK was going to be here and take a little bit of the wind out of the sails of Republicans and take that. Do you think that happened, or did Republicans still own the fact that they were owning their issues?
I think that both the Speaker and the President's remarks focused on Utahns and what this did for Utah. I think they did attempt to say, hey, the tail's not wagging the dog here. We thought this was a Utah-based issue. We did it for Utah. We didn't do it because it was assigned from Washington. My guess is that if you're suspect, you stayed suspect, and if you were for, you stayed for, but we got some notoriety. I will say, I think the Duffy, it was interesting. They ran the same day, but they had completely different coverage. The transportation one was about double tracking and about getting some federal dollars in, and it had Celeste Malloy and John Curtis there. Had a very different look and feel. Utah has punched above their weight in getting federal dollars for transportation. It fits in well with an Olympic agenda.
Yeah.
The challenge with transportation is interesting, though, because the Trump administration's taking away some of that discretionary dollars there. But going back to sort of the Speaker and Kennedy, this also gave a platform to Speaker Schultz in which, during his opening speech, he said, hey, sign us up for block grants. Give us your money, federal government, and we'll spend it better.
Don't give us the rules.
He repeated that request, and he repeated it and said, we'll take it in a number of ways. We would take it in transportation. We would take it in Medicare. He listed just about anything we would take their money for. So
This almost sounds like green eggs and ham.
Yeah, exactly. And so I do think that was the state attempting to reclaim. Now, I will say, Kennedy's machine was really good. I saw more push out from the Trump administration than I saw Utah officials be able to muster, at least on my feed. So what does that mean? Nothing. But like, as I followed the feed, I would say
They did a good job with it.
Kennedy's got a huge apparatus that he's pushing out, sort of long, short style, using all platforms. It was interesting.
Interesting. Yeah, I kind of missed on that with my kind of whirlwind trip to California. Were you up at the Capitol for all of this?
I was not.
You were not. You missed out on the fun. What do you think? Was it a good moment for Utah, or was it the national government kind of usurping issues here in Utah and making them their own?
Well, you know, if Utah has good ideas and the federal government wants to adopt, I think most of us would say wonderful. Clearly wanting to get the federal government out of lots of programs and leave control with the states, whether it's Utah or other states around the nation, I think is a better approach in so many ways. And so whenever we get the message to articulate that, I think we should take advantage of it.
Excellent. Do you think anything will come out of these meetings where Utah gets some of that help or federal dollars for some of the programs we're working on, whether it's the EPA, transportation, or some of these health initiatives?
Well, when you look at the health initiatives and when you get really broader and talk Medicare and Medicaid and those type of programs, what does that mean going forward? I mean, RFK is clearly shaking up certain activities within the agency. I think the state of Utah would say, hey, block grant money to us for Medicaid, or for Medicaid, and let us just run Medicaid. We can do it better, more efficiently. Let us have work authorization for those that are able-bodied adults and so forth, and leave us free to better meet the needs of everyday Utahns. I think it would be great for us to be able to try that. It would be interesting to see where the federal government's willing to go in terms of creating more flexibility when it comes to some of those federal programs that are so bureaucratic and oftentimes result in kind of the opposite of what you're really wanting.
We have done this a couple times for infrastructure in Utah.
Yeah.
Infrastructure is easier though, because the big downside, I'm not fully against this, but the big downside for social services is, did people get protected? And regulations, and which people, and where were the checks and balances without becoming federal bureaucracy? It's easier for things like water and roads because you can kind of see if the money is a little more straightforward about how the money gets spent and where outcomes come from. Health outcomes are swishier and harder to figure out. So it'll be interesting to see if the feds let us be a national experiment if they pick and choose. We have been highly successful in infrastructure in using block grants from the feds.
Yeah. Speaking of the federal government, President Trump, while he's working on all of his tariffs and everything, his side hustle right now is his tax plan, the big beautiful plan, and the House has delayed a vote right now. They have at least a dozen conservative Republicans that are saying, I'm not voting for this, there's too much money in there. Yes, so thoughts on this one? Are they going to get this done for the president, or are we just spending, Republicans and Democrats, still as much money as we were spending before and nobody's saving anyone any money?
I think we need to get to putting in place and preserving most of the tax cuts that Trump put in place his first administration. But we got to deal with the deficit, and we got to deal with the debt. And I think that's where several House Republicans are having concerns, which is, okay, the Senate is kind of glossing over some of the debt that's built into this.
Yeah.
And there are certain assumptions, and they're double spending some money, and this is not fiscally responsible. So I'm all for cutting taxes. I want us to do more of it. I want a smaller federal government, but we got to also work on reining in the debt.
Yeah.
Do conservatives have the courage that they need to cut the programs they say need to be cut? No.
That's the problem, is because everybody loves a good program when it's there, and it's not easy to be the one that rips the Band-Aid off.
Most
And
people
somebody's
say,
going to have
go
to.
ahead and cut Maura's program, but don't cut
That's
mine,
exactly right.
and vice versa.
Yeah.
That's exactly
You
right.
love your baby's best.
And the magnitude of the problem that we had, you know, I told somebody the other day, you could cut the entire national defense. Department of Defense, cut it completely, we still wouldn't balance the budget.
The other problem is deficit recovery is healthy but not satisfying, right? Cut. You get nothing back, except now you don't have as much debt. So like, that's the right thing to do, but
Yeah.
it's not like my constituents gave me a standing ovation for doing that. And the problem with incremental spending that America has been doing for 50 years is that now it is a discussion of takeaway. And there is not an elected official around that wants to have the takeaway conversation with
Yeah,
you.
because if you're used to getting money and it's a program you like, even if ultimately in the end it's a want, not a need, someone's losing something, and there's going to be people who are mad. Some of your constituents are not going to be happy. So yeah, it's
And
a hard
someone
choice.
had a benefit. Someone did something
We
with
cut
it.
$1 million in education. All of a sudden, why do you hate kids? It's like, well, that's a program that didn't work, didn't deliver the outcomes. No, you hate kids.
So I'm a little dubious as to think that this is the year of change for Congress.
One of these days, we gotta start saving money.
One of
I
these
know.
days.
Yeah, speaking of that uncertainty though, I
The
think.
question is, what do you do it after you're over the cliff and, you know.
Yeah, because, I think we all know in our heads, you cuts need to happen, they have to happen, but if it's something you want, you're like, but wait, we need that money. My daughter has been applying for some of the National Science Foundation grants to go get her PhD. And it's a really long, complicated process to apply for that. When you get the money, it's essentially sent to the university, and then it pays you a whopping $37,000 a year to do your research as a PhD. She applied for that, and she just got the answer back that she got an honorable mention, which means they give you a pat on the back and said, you did great work, but there will be no money. And then there was a clause in there saying, wait, there may be more money. But normally, I think there's probably 13 to 15,000. Yeah, there might be, yeah. But usually, I think 13 to 15,000 scientists apply for these, and usually about 2,000 get them. This year, they gave out 1,000, which means there is money being held back. Which, in my mind, I know, okay, sometimes you have to put a pause to this funding, but when it's your kid, but you're like, but wait, why can't you give out all 2,000 of them then?
Right.
So, yeah, there's hard decisions, I think, in every area of the government going on as they're trying to figure out where that money should be spent. So, I think we're in for some tough conversations and, over the next few years.
And for some people, they feel like it's Chicken Little. I've been hearing this for years and decades. And
Right?
the sky has not fallen yet, so we're okay.
Yeah.
But the math will catch up.
Yeah, the math will catch up, and I keep hearing even President Trump talking about, we're never going to touch your Social Security, and Republicans don't want to touch it, Democrats don't want it, but every year we get closer. Last year it was 10 years to the point where it would be insolvent, and you'd be losing at least 25% of every check that's going out. So there are problems that we want to just get to the cliff to, where you can't blame it on anyone other than, we've got to do it now, but no one wants to preemptively fix the problems, So.
So we'll feel the pain a little bit
Just
more
wait
than
a little
we need
longer.
to.
Yeah. So we'll plan on fixing Social Security in about 9.5 years, when we have absolutely no choice to do it.
One of the key things is we need more kids.
We
who
do
are
need more
working,
kids.
Paying
Yeah.
taxes for that. And 9 years doesn't give you the runway to get there.
It's true. We have a whole lot of boomers right now and not enough kids, which is surprising when you look at schools here in Utah, because we have a lot of crowded elementary schools, but apparently Utah can't supply the nation with kids.
Have you seen our birth rate? We've dropped to 10th highest in the
We're at
nation.
the 10th
not,
now?
We're not number one or number two. We have dropped to 10th.
But isn't
That's interesting.
The drop to 10 is like a quarter of a kid, right?
Well, it's a relatively small
I mean,
number,
I'm not-
but
25% of a baby.
It's like a
as the
couple of
oldest
arms.
of 11 kids, I never would have imagined we would not always be the top.
Well, I mean, if you're the oldest, what do you care, right? And it's
So is there a
those
really
are behind
Catholic
you.
state that's beating us right now? I haven't looked at the numbers lately.
Places like North and South Dakota and stuff like that.
Interesting. Okay. All right. We got to try harder, Utah.
Yeah, do more.
Stay home. Turn on some sexy
Take
music.
off Good Friday.
Yes.
You're done.
Do something. One vote that did happen in the U.S. House, they passed Senator Mike Lee's SAVE Act, which he's been talking about for the last year. It would secure the vote, but would it disenfranchise millions? That's the big question out there. Right now, the vote that passed in the House was 220 to 208. 4 Democrats sided with Republicans on this. And Maura, there's questions about whether this would make it so women would have a hard time proving who they are because their name doesn't match the birth certificate. Republicans say no. Do you believe this will disenfranchise voters, or is it a system that could be put in place to guarantee that only citizens are voting in our federal elections?
This is a solution without a problem. It'll disenfranchise and make it harder for voting voters to vote. And this is virtue signaling. There's nothing good about it. The only good news about this is that Senator Lee is taking the baton to take it to the Senate. The House passed it, and I do not think the Senate will pass it. All it does is talk about getting rid of the ability for a non-American to vote. But here's the good news. There are no non-Americans voting. There are 1 or 2, but you currently can't do this. This is an act of redundancy. But there are real problems that have been brought up by election official after election official, in which if you are a female who has a maiden name who's been changed and somewhere along the line your documents aren't lining up, or if you're an older person, I mean, there are a lot of really normal practical problems, and they have not cited a problem that we're trying to solve. So this is another take at us right now being afraid of those people who don't look like us, talk like us, and right now we're in the grips of being fearful of people who aren't like us. There's no need for this. I'm counting on the good sense of both Republicans and Democrats in the Senate for just letting this go.
Do you think that we need the SAVE Act, John? Will it save us from ourselves?
There you go. One of the beauties of America's electoral system is it's highly decentralized, which means it's very difficult.
Run by local
Essentially,
governments,
Run
yeah.
by local governments, counties, cities, states, whatever it might be. So it's very difficult to hack. You know, if Russia, whoever wants to go hack it, it's very decentralized. The more we push down this path, the more we start to centralize it, the more we put power in the hands of the federal government, which is a concern to me. With E-Verify, we put power in the hands of the federal government to dictate who can have a job and who can't have a job. And I get that it's pitched that it's about immigration. It's not. It's about the federal government controlling Americans' ability to work. And my fear is if we go down this path too far, all of a sudden we're going to centralize more power in whatever administration's in control in D.C. with greater control over elections. And I don't think that's a good outcome. I don't care which party it is. That valuable tool to one party all of a sudden becomes a weapon when put in the hands of the other party. And that, unfortunately, is the path that we seem to be going on too many activities.
All right, handing down swords to the other party. Okay, we'll watch as that heads to the Senate. I wanted to mention really quickly here, a judge this week restored the White House access for the Associated Press. I think this is ultimately a win. Free speech matters, even if it's speech you don't like.
But you still get your access?
I do not have access. I have not asked for access. But I know there's a lot of people online fighting about this. This was all over the Associated Press not wanting to call the Gulf of America instead of the Gulf of Mexico. I prefer to just call it the Gulf as someone who lived there. I don't actually give it a last name. It only has a first name, much like Oprah. But they are back to being able to be in the Oval Office again. John, was this the right decision?
I think we should have an expanded ability for the media to be in there to ask questions of the administration.
Yeah.
So
Although I wish they would fix how they refer to the LDS Church. So, but you know, that's in the style guide as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the important point. This was not about whether AP could or couldn't go. It's about whether you could punish an outlet because you didn't
Their
like
speech.
what they did. And that is a really important affirmation in America, that you can't say, oh, because you didn't say it the way I wanted, you're not allowed, but you're saying it the way I wanted. Now, if they're allowing no access, then they don't have to allow access. It's that once you're in there, you can't punish because. The other thing is, I just think, you know, Heidi, I'm going to give a shout out to the decorum of the press. The Associated Press was formed a year before the pioneers hit the great state of Utah. So in 1846 when...
Did they start it before they left?
Yeah, I mean, that's a rarely known fact that it was Joseph Smith who started the Associated Press. Yeah, and you've learned it
Write
here
that
on
down,
tape
everyone.
two.
Write it down.
Hashtag fake news.
Hashtag fake news. Nobody knows this. No, I mean, like, this is an institution. What's interesting is that the Associated Press brought this. It's largely a wire service. They're known for kind of calling balls and strikes. They've been in the pool since the pool began, since Garfield.
Yeah.
They were in the press pool. So the restoration of the fact that you can't pick and choose press who write the way you want it to write is a really important affirmation of our Bill of Rights. And I really like that when they wrote the opinion, they chapter and versed several precedents.
I love
Yeah.
it. Maura mentioned Garfield. I'm thinking of the cat.
Not a
You
precedent.
know, nobody looks at the cat as much as they should. I've just done some major history for you. Garfield the cat started the press pool and the relationship between the pioneers and the AP.
I didn't realize it had been around since 1846, and it's certainly the Associated Press has made some changes. If you were to look, there's several different sites for media bias where you can go online and readers and everyone kind of rank where they're at. And probably 10, even 15 years ago, the Associated Press was pretty much down the center. It's rated by most of those sites as not just leaning left, but far to the left. But whether they're leaning or centrist or whatever they are, I just don't think limiting voices and limiting free speech is where we want to go in this country.
So I've got a question for you. So as I've watched over, I'm going to say the decades.
Okay.
I saw this going back at least to the Obama administration, like that happened before. But, you know, the news media, basically what I see is elected officials saying, I'm going to give you an interview, but here's the ground rules. Here's what you can ask. Here's what you can't ask. And if you don't softly agree to that, you're not going to be allowed.
Oh, I
to
don't
even
play
have an
those
interview.
garbage rules.
But I see some of that, especially at the federal level. give me your thoughts.
It happens a lot. I don't like that. If I do an interview with someone, I want no ground rules. I will do the interview, and if you don't want to do the interview, then we're not playing.
There were no ground rules before we did this podcast.
There were no ground rules. I do.
For you, there's not, because Heidi gives me a list every time I come in.
That's right. This is what you're going to do. This is what you're going to wear. I do when sometimes it drives me nuts, but like, let's say I'm talking to one of our congressional leaders. Sometimes they're like, hey, what issues you're going to talk about? I'll never give people questions, but just for the sake of just so they can be somewhat prepared, I'll give them a list of like 4 or 5 issues I'm going to talk about. I'll probably ask them about 8 of them or 9 or 10. I'll go beyond that. I'm never going to give you questions. I don't make the ground rules, or if you're like, this is one issue I'm not going to talk about, I'll give you an example. Tim Ballard from Underground Railroad, when that was happening, he called up the station and had for some reason decided that I would be a good person to interview him and sit down with him and his wife. We agreed to do the interview, but when it came down to it, they didn't show up to do the interview because they had specific things they didn't want to be asked or they wanted to happen. And my rules are, you come and do the interview, I'm going to ask you hard questions. If you don't like it, then go to someone else. So I'm not a fan.
I also think this is an indication of our lack of ability to express ourselves as well. So as someone who preps a lot of people to block press questions, I mean,
Who
we
expresses
Maura,
yourself quite
you're the
well.
worst.
I
You
know,
teach people
I am
to
the
pivot
worst,
and get
but
away from me.
Exactly,
Mhm.
bridge statements, friends.
Yeah.
But like, there's an art to that.
Yeah.
There's an art to saying there are no rules, but she has a job and you have a job, and you figure out how to represent your office and your position well, and she's going to ask you those. And we've somewhat lost the art of even just being institutions and not cutting off access, but going toe to toe in the arena, the public arena. Part of it is also, the place I am empathetic is just how snarky the online world is. And I think
Seriously?
that deters so many people from having trust in a reporter like you, who you're never going to pull. You may ask them a direct question that they don't want to answer, but I look and say, okay, that's about your skill level. That's different than taking cheap shots. And credible reporters still don't take cheap shots.
And I do think that there can be frustration. I've done interviews before, which is weird for me because I'm always on the opposite end, and when someone picks the sound bites you're using,
you've been overseeing that.
it's sort of weird because you're like, well, that's not the piece of the conversation I wanted out there. So I do understand that people can be frustrated if you take a soundbite out of context or it's not really the message they wanted or whatnot. I think as an industry, that's why too, when you look at our stories, the average one that ends up on a newscast, they're 90 seconds long. It's hard to have a real long conversation and let people really get out what they want to. So we try to post full interviews now that we have social media and have the ability to do that on YouTube or on KUTV.com, so people can listen for themselves unedited and listen to the full conversation. And I hope that things like that build trust in podcasts like this where you can talk longer than a couple seconds, because you really can't talk real issues with sound bites that everyone likes to reshare on social media. I know it's fun and they're, pithy and you can attack dog it.
And witty, it grabs clicks.
It grabs clicks, but real conversations don't happen in a few seconds. So I think it's important to remember that. What are you watching for this week, Maura? Or do you have fun plans that we should all know about? Be jealous of?
Question. No, we're doing some family fun this
I like family
weekend.
fun.
And I love Easter, so we are headed into Easter week.
Yes, we are.
So we're not there yet, but we're the
Are you the
parents.
cool grandma who hides money in eggs, or what do you do for Easter to make it fun?
My grandkids are too little for
okay.
them to know how cool I am yet.
Okay.
We have these elaborate scavenger hunts. We have layers of both religious and bunny based activities, but I'm a big Easter fan. But this weekend is a prep weekend, and we have some family coming in early, so we'll do some family activities in the sunshine, I think, right? We're still in the sunshine.
It's going to get cooler.
I think
It's going to be
it's
like
gonna be
69 on
cooler.
Saturday and like 57 on
This
Sunday.
82 is a little too much for me too
Yeah.
fast.
I'm 75
I'm
right
okay
now.
with long sleeves.
Yeah, so we're taking a small break and then we'll warm it up over the weekend. Big plans for you? You're getting packed and ready for the big wedding, or?
This weekend is really prepping. I've got a 20-page paper I got to finish for school, and then I've got to study for a final on Monday the 21st.
I do not miss
Then
that.
I am done.
Freedom. Is your wife so excited for you to be done with homework?
Well, yeah, and she said, so what are you going to do when you finish up school and you've got all this time? And I said, well, 35 hours a week of bar prep. Because that's at the end of July. She's like,
Oh.
Really?
There's always something else. Well, good job being responsible. We'll have a little fun for you. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. I'll be excited to see how many Palm Sunday Bernie Sanders followers we have. So we'll report on that next week. So thanks for listening. Tell your friends about us and give us a rating.
I realized halfway through that our real activity